Good morning. I'm Kim White with Case Metrics. I want to say thank you all for joining us this morning. We're going to give a few more participants an opportunity to join us. And while we're doing that, I can talk to you guys just about a few preliminaries. Today's presentation will be by Michael Haggard of the Haggard Law Firm in Coral Gables, Florida. And he's going to talk to us about some things he's learned and is incorporating into his practice that have to do with a post-pandemic trial practice. We've all learned a lot, and I actually think this will be a nice interactive exercise for us to hear from a seasoned trial attorney, some things he's learned in the past year that he's going to share with us. And then what we'll do at the end is we'll allow about 15 minutes for questions. And during the questions, if you also have some comments you want to share, that will be fine. Also, let me just point out a couple of things. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see both the Q&A button and you'll see a chat. If you have any technology related issues, you're having trouble with the webinar, with hearing or seeing things, if you will put a note in the chat, we have Mary Ellen Stockton standing by, and she can help you with any tech issues that you have. If you have questions for us or for Michael Haggard, please put those in the Q&A, and we will reach a good stopping point at about the 45-minute mark. And at that point, I'll read your questions to Mr. Haggard, and he can take some of those questions, as many as we have time to handle. As far as Michael Haggard, I'm not sure that he needs much of an introduction. Most of you know him. You've seen a number of his verdicts in the Case Metrics premises liability database in particular. Michael and his partners have secured several verdicts in excess of $100 million. And I don't know if there's anybody else we can say that about. Two of his cases that were in excess of $100 million involved child drowning cases. And that's become an issue that's near and dear to him. And he has exercised his philanthropy toward that. He also has a premises liability shooting case that resulted in a verdict that was over $100 million. And of course, a number of verdicts that are in excess of $5, $10, $20 million. In addition to his work in the courtroom, Michael does continue to pay it forward in his community through his philanthropy. He, in particular, serves on the advisory council for the National Drowning Prevention Alliance. You know, we've seen too many of these drowning cases, and in addition to working in the courtroom, he's also working in the community on that. Michael also serves on the board of directors for the National Crime Victim Bar Association, and a lot of us have seen him on a national platform with families of victims of school shootings and things like that. So his work is very meaningful throughout the community. Again, today he's going to speak to us on post-pandemic trial practice. And without further ado, I will hand this off to Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, usually, I find myself speaking about some of the issues that Kim had talked about, whether it might be handling aquatic cases or negligent security cases or the ins and outs of trial practice. But I was really interested in this topic because it's something we all share, whether you're a plaintiff's trial lawyer, an insurance defense lawyer, corporate lawyer, any type of law practice, you've been affected, as we all have in our every aspect of our lives by the pandemic. And usually I'm someone that is, optimistic, but at the same time very cautious, especially, with everything that's happened in the pandemic. I can be described as somebody who, is so emotional about being vaccinated. I mean, when I got my first shot, I literally looked just at the amazement of science, and we might be getting out of this this darkness, but at the same time, being cautious because you're so protective of not only your family, but your employees and your staff who, as we all know, as lawyers and law firms, that's our second family. So it's been a really, not only a tug and pull, but an emotional thing about how do we move forward, but yet, be safe. And we've all dealt with it in every aspect of our lives. And what we're here to talk about today is obviously what is our trial practice? what is really any legal practice going to continue to look like as we get through 2021, as we go through into 2022. So, what I'd like to do today is talk about the past, what we've all been through, and then move into, where we are now and what it's going to be. And like Kim said, I would love for the question and answer period for folks to really talk about this. Let's get a discussion going, because there is no expert on this. I'm certainly not one, and really no one is, unless you're 120 years old and you lived through the Spanish flu in 1918. You are not, we are not experts. We're all going through this together. So I'm going to advance these slides. Sometimes my computer goes to sleep, but it looks to be good there. So, I think one crazy thing I'll say to y'all is we need to all take a break at some point and just say, wow, what we've lived through. Because it does happen every once in 100 years. And hopefully that's the case. And, we've all done it together. We've all been through this process as lawyers, being thrown out of our offices, working from home, yet really not skipping a beat in most jurisdictions. I mean, hearings went right to Zoom. Different things went right along right away. And outside of trials, everything has moved along. And that's kind of amazing when we consider everything else we've been through. Many of us didn't go to a restaurant for months or even a year. I mean, didn't get on an airplane. I'd love to know the percentage of people on this seminar today who have been on an airplane since. It's still striking, who have traveled. Some have. Everybody has a little bit of different experiences. But these are images that, to me, are never going to leave my mind. Just looking at our country, looking at the world, and what happened, and how every aspect of it is changing. And as lawyers, we have to be innovative too. And I think one overriding thing that I think we've all learned from this is how behind the times we really were. I mean, as a trial lawyer, I can tell you that I handle cases not only all over Florida, but all over the country. To have judges right before the pandemic tell you can't appear by phone without an order, without permission, you can't attend a motion calendar, a hearing by telephone, you have to be in person. I had that happen on a case in January of 2020. And then by April, everybody in the country is by Zoom and hearings. So think about that contrast. Think about how behind the courts were. And I've said this, and some judges maybe get a little angry at me for saying it, but it's true. I mean, and truthfully, it's true about us too. The fact that we weren't using some form of video conferencing, the fact that we weren't using Zoom and other platforms. I joked with Kim and everybody yesterday when we were getting ready for this. I had a Zoom account before the pandemic for one reason. I was on the board of the National Center for Victims of Crime, and they had Zoom meetings. They just were like, this makes no sense. And we've been Zoom meetings for a couple of years. And so I didn't know how to get in my account or anything like that. I just pressed the button and it turned on. The fact we hadn't been doing that, we were doing telephone conference board meetings, it's kind of embarrassing as the legal industry hadn't adapted. So one thing I want to get an overriding theme today is going to be, let's not only hang on to all the advantages and the advancements that we've made, but let's look towards the future and how we can change some things in the future. Again, I mean, I'm a big fan of, when you go through adversity and when you go through unique experiences like we all have gone through, don't forget, don't just move on. We need to remember all these things that happened to us and what has changed. With my cases, just talking a bit about my practice, handling a lot of negligent security cases, you can imagine that these are the people that are my defendants: shopping malls, strip malls, bars, nightclubs. So, we really had to look at what's going to happen to our cases if the whole country is shut down and nothing is going on, much like if there's a cruise line lawyer on the phone. We've handled a lot of cruise line cases. Got a really nice verdict about a year before the pandemic, and suddenly got referrals in over 10 cruise line cases. Well, we haven't gotten any lately because no cruise has sailed. So there's those instances of how our businesses have changed, how our practices have changed, and we've had to adapt. Now, as we climb out of it, we're seeing those things kind of come back, as the world opens up. And I think we have to understand how other businesses, the economy has changed in different ways. Again, no matter what practice you're in, it's going to affect you, and you've got to really keep an eye out on what's happening out there. So, what have we done? And again, kind of the way I want to deal with this is I want to deal with the great things that we have adapted to and what we can keep going, because I think that is so important. You name it, we've done it. As a legal industry, we closed up our offices. 90% of us, or some percentage, I saw a study the other day. Some folks still went in. I had a partner or two that once the office was closed, they were kind of like, that's the most quiet place I can go because no one's there. And weren't endangering anybody, even at the height of the many surges, because they're in the office alone and they could get a lot done. But nothing stopped. We had immediately went to hearings on Zoom. If we were together today, I bet you I could ask everybody at this webinar, if it was a seminar, and I said, okay, whoever wants to go to an 8:45 motion calendar again? Who wants to drive to downtown Miami, drive to downtown Orlando, park, walk, go through security, and sit in a hallway with other lawyers waiting for your opponent to get there, to have that hearing, leave the courthouse, get in your car, and waste 2 hours. Yes, we can look at our phones, we can do certain things, we can make some calls, but compared to today, where we can sit there at our desk for an 8:45 motion to compel, whatever the issue is, and work on other issues, draft other things, make other calls until you hear the judge call your case name, and then you turn off the mute button. I mean, that is something that I have to think is here to stay. I hope it is here to stay. Every judge I've talked to, every lawyer I've talked to has said, absolutely, we got to keep doing that. One issue we dealt with immediately, being a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer, is how are we going to sign up clients? I mean, and I'm talking about the height. With all the surges, what are we going to do? Are we going to their house? Later on, obviously, when you're masking, you're doing different things. So we went to DocuSign, which anybody who's closed on a house in the last 10 years, done a real estate deal, knows everybody does DocuSign. You don't go into the closing agent's office. Before COVID, you weren't doing that anymore. And we thought we would have problems. I can't tell you the resistance I had from referral lawyers. That's never going to work. You got to go meet with them. Don't you want this case, Mike? And those kind of things. We've never had a client in town, out of town, have a problem with DocuSign. It goes like that. And to get our contingency fee contract signed. How about clients, especially, when I represent catastrophically injured clients, obviously represent clients who lost a loved one, to ask them to drive to Coral Gables, or to fly down or me fly up to meet them. The meetings I've had over Zoom with clients, are they as intimate as in the house? Maybe not. Are they 1,000 times better than on the phone? Do they replace having them to constantly come in the office and relive everything they're going through? They're 20 minutes, 30 minutes. The amount of time that is saved is truly amazing. Again, something that I think should stay. Even, we're back in the office now, 90% of us. We're fortunate. We own our own building. We're not in the 18th floor of a building. There's no elevators involved or anything like that. But our team meetings are virtually 100% on Zoom. And you can go from meeting to meeting with different, or at least for me as the managing partner, for different lawyers. I don't have to go, hey, let's go to the conference room. Hey, do we do this? We're redoing our offices. We're going to have plenty of conference rooms. We're going to have all that. But this is going to be a supplement of things to happen. So, when you talk about the positives that we've learned from this, there's so many that are going to continue. There's certainly negatives as well, and we'll talk about that. We all deal with expert witnesses on both sides, and it has to be the biggest pain in the world where you say, okay, Dr. So-and-so or, expert so-and-so, you've been provided those 10 depositions, right? You've read them. You have these many exhibits. You have, whatever the issue may be, the type of expert. There's nothing better than going on Zoom, sharing your screen, and going over all of the documents with them. Because you can tell, as we all know, on both sides, that expert hasn't looked through anything yet. They're working on 100 cases. And now that they have a pre-deposition conference with you, they're starting to bone up. And you sit there and you go through that and you say, come on, Joe, have you read these crime statistics, or have you read this deposition? Have you read the police reports? I mean, I've got them right here and you don't seem to be familiar with them. And you can't do that over the phone. You can do it over Zoom, and you don't have to necessarily go meet with them then and there. You're still going to have pre-deposition conferences in person with your expert. And I would argue there's nothing that substitutes for that. But this is something that aids us and saves us so much time. Those are all the incredible things I haven't even talked about yet, where, you're out of town. Whether you're on vacation, whether you're doing something, and to be able, which we were always able to do it. We just didn't think of it. To be able to sit there in a hotel room at a FJA meeting or at a, Florida bar meeting, and to sit there in your hotel room and do a hearing. I'm not missing something because I have a depo. I'm not missing something because I have a hearing. You could do it from the meeting. So it's gonna make those kind of things, I think, incredibly productive. There's a downside to it. I don't know. I'd love to see in the chat or something, people tell me, I've tried to do 2 Zooms at once and sit there with my iPad and my laptop and try to listen to it. And the problem with that, the audacity of me thinking I could do that, is this is so easy. And I think one thing that's happened to me, I don't know if you guys have had the same experience, is I've tried to do too much. I've tried to pack in, wait a minute, this Zoom's only going to last a half hour, so I can have another one after. And so that starts to affect, whether you can do things to the level and the professionalism that we all strive to have. So that's one warning I would say to everyone, is that that's a problem that we've had. I'm seeing it now, and I'm speaking from a plaintiff's lawyer perspective, that in a couple of hot cases I have, the defense is trying to depose anybody and everybody. That would never happen if we were live. It might be just lawyers saying, God, I can get this done now. It's easy. No ill will, no extra billing events or anything like that. But that's a little bit of the downside too. I think with hearings, I think now what's happening is all you got to do is turn on your computer. Why not have the hearing versus let's work it out? So I think there are those problems that we're starting to see. I talked again beforehand, we were talking, and I said one amazing thing about this process. I'll never forget, I had a very large case against the school board, a Title IX case, right when everything hit, when the NBA shut down, when last March. And the congeniality that the defense lawyer and I and the school board itself, the defendant, with us looking at such an uncertain world, we were able to resolve that case. And it was almost like everybody coming together, like, oh my God, we have this Armageddon coming. Can't we just resolve this case? Can't cooler heads prevail? It was a very large case. And we were able to do that. And I'm not going to lie to you. Part of me was, my God, what is the school board going to do? They had to buy all these laptops for, low income children that didn't have a chance to be educated. and we were fighting over not even a monetary issue. And, so that congeniality lasted a while, I thought. I think it's waning. I think we're in this uncertain area now of, are we still in a pandemic? Are we out? How comfortable are we? And what are the new rules? And that's something that, we definitely want to get into today. And the question is, what are we going to do? Offices, what are we going to do? Our internal working of all of our law firms. Everybody's doing different things. There's some offices that still nobody is in. You talk to managing partners of the biggest firms. I talked to a managing partner of a litigation department of a law firm that's 850 lawyers. And he can't figure out why in the world associates and different folks aren't coming back into the office, because there's nobody there. You can be very productive and everything like that. So they're still dealing with the battles of leases. What are people going to do? As we go through this vaccination progression, and we're only a year and 2 months into this, I think the writing's on the wall that yes, we're going to have tremendous flexibility, but at the same time, the old world is going to reappear. It's really about the balance that we all find and what's best for you, what's best for your law firm, what's best for mine, what's best for big law, and those types of things. Obviously, the technology is going to stay and hopefully get even more advanced, which really is my hope, so that you can have all these internal meetings and your client meetings, witness meetings, where you don't have to drive all over the place. But there is going to be those occasions. And we'll talk to that as we get into marketing as well. Again, hearings, it's my hope, and everybody I've talked to, that motion calendar, 5-minute, 10-minute hearings stay on Zoom forever. Special set hearings, evidentiary hearings might be a little bit different. We're obviously going to spend a significant section of this presentation talking about trial, which is a different animal, obviously. But investigations, we've done so many investigation contacts through Zoom, through FaceTime, through different things, taking those types of statements, which has been great. But you've got to get out there, and you certainly can get out there now, obviously, with where we're progressing in the pandemic, to conduct your investigations on your cases. This is a big one. I talked to in my view, one of the best mediators in the state of Florida last night. We were obviously talking about a particular case, and I asked him, what do you think is going to be the future? And when you talk about mediation, this is something that obviously, in my view, didn't skip a beat in terms of being scheduled and happening during the pandemic. Even though we had problems in trial settings, obviously had problems with trials and weren't having trials. The positive of the Zoom mediation is, I'm showing you my presentation. If there are any defense lawyers on the webinar that I've had cases with, they know that my firm has insisted under the rules that excess adjusters, always be present at mediation, because I want to show them my client's story. No offense to the defense lawyer, but my client hired me. I want to show my case to the decision maker. So we have always moved to compel that, follow the rules forever. The beautiful thing about Zoom is they're seeing the presentation. Again, and I'll take the blame for this. As a trial lawyer, I never said, well, wait a minute, Mr. So-and-so, your adjuster from New York can't attend in person. Let's do a video conference. Let's do Zoom, and I can do my presentation. I never did that until the pandemic hit. So I think it has worked to a certain degree, maybe to 80%, close to the way we used to have it, because the excess adjusters, the decision makers, are on the Zoom at home in their office watching the presentation. It's about as good as it gets. Do we miss that last 5:15 when the mediator comes in, gets the defense lawyer, the plaintiff's lawyer, and the excess adjuster in a room? Yes, that is missing. But appearing on the phone, which is an absolute waste of time, is gone from the equation. what's my prediction? More importantly, what was this mediator's prediction? He thinks that insurance companies, big defendants who aren't paying this travel cost of their adjusters, of their risk management folks flying all over the country, they like it. And you don't have an adjuster that's got to leave. They have a 5:45 flight back to Chicago. They got to leave. They're distracted. They don't have to do that. They can work from home till 7:38 and get the case resolved. So I think we're going to return to in-person mediations to some degree. I think it's something that plaintiff and defense lawyers and adjusters, everybody have to have an honest conversation about, which is one of the biggest problems with mediation still to this day. It's just people not wanting to talk about getting rid of those roadblocks ahead of time. Same thing with depositions, by the way. Do I miss in-person depositions? Absolutely. I've taken several during this pandemic. There's nothing like sharing exhibits on Zoom compared to live. Handing a witness a document, having them put it up for the camera versus splitting the screen in half and showing your exhibit, especially a powerful exhibit, and controlling the witness in that fashion. I have become a huge fan of that. So in depositions, I think, again, you're going to have a little bit of a hybrid. Out of town depots, I think people are going to err towards Zoom. Why not? Depending on the nature of the witness, depending on all that. But I think it's definitely in some form here to stay with Zoom depositions as well as Zoom mediations. I think that's a good thing. So marketing, here we are in a webinar. We're not in person. We don't have a cocktail hour planned later on. We're not having that hand-to-hand, and I think that is missed. And I think that's going to come back because we all miss that human nature of it. But we have certainly learned some things. What my firm started to do, and obviously we speak at like a lot of you do and your partners and different people throughout different trial lawyer associations, bar associations, we've always done that. What we started to do with Case Metrics is we started to do seminars where we would do our firm and some of our specialties. We go around the state of Florida. And it was fun. It was great. We get some sponsors. Didn't really cost that much money. We weren't sharing the stage with other lawyers, hour slots at the FGA or the Florida bar, or wherever. We controlled it. We did them in person. The pandemic hit and we switched to webinars like this. I can tell you we've reached hundreds more people via our webinars. We have an average of probably 100 people. We were doing it once a month and they're still going to do it. And it's a great way for people at lunch. They're sitting there either at home or somewhere and they're getting CLE credits and it's for an hour. It's not a whole day out of the office. It's for an hour. And so we found those to be very successful. Obviously, everything's opening up. People are going to lunches now. They're going to marketing lunches now. But I still think this is going to have a huge place in your marketing for the type of work that you do. We did, again, monthly, we did a bunch of different topics throughout. And it's something that, if there is a niche you like to talk about, an issue, I think it's something that folks should do and I think will continue to do. This, and by the way, not only do we host our own webinars, but obviously speaking like, here for Case Metrics or, and Kim talked earlier about our work in drowning cases. Ironically, I've spoken at 2 NDPA, National Drowning Prevention Alliance, seminars or webinars, I should say, in the last year during the pandemic. They've had 2 conferences virtually during the pandemic. So that's been a big part of it too. I've got my first in-person speech at the FJA seminar coming up in June if I'm not in trial. And so that's exciting. I mean, that's the old days of you get done speaking, someone comes up to you and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about a case. Great. See him later. You have a beer, you talk about it. Hopefully by the end of the day, you're co-counsel. Does that happen through webinars? You bet it does. having to phone calls and emails after. It's not as personal. I think there's going to be a hybrid, and that might be a word if we all leave here together today, that we're going to be in a hybrid, I think for the better, because I think this technology has shown us a lot of things we should have been doing beforehand. So again, I mean, we do, our email marketing, we do our social media marketing, all things that we've increased and gotten better at during the pandemic. We've learned a lot. We've tried to apply it. And now we're very challenged with, okay, what's the next step? I'll give you a example. That lawyer I was talking to, who 850 person law firm, all obviously across the United States and international. He told me that they had saved $20 million on travel, meals, entertainment, and marketing over the last 12 months. $20 million. My firm, obviously, our travel has plummeted. Entertainment has gone down tremendously. The balance between all of us as we go back to the hybrid is, to maintain income in our revenue streams, what balance are we going to all have to find between that, taking a lawyer to lunch, getting on a plane, going to a seminar or wherever, versus, staying at home and doing the webinars and those kind of things. That's a hybrid we're all going to have to figure out for ourselves. The interesting thing is both avenues are going to exist in the future. So, did a lot of interviews, did a lot of stuff, not only about, COVID and about adapting to it as a lawyer, but really into, other areas, trying to get out there and talk about, obviously the mass shootings, which we handle a lot of, drowning issues, negligent security cases, trucking, all the different things we've done. We've tried to get out there to the media and do those type of interviews, do our marketing. So, it's just going to be, what is the next step? And obviously we've talked about social media and hopefully everyone has taken this time during the year to increase their presence there and really find out how they want to market through social media and really have a plan. Because we have had a year to kind of think about, what are we going to do? What's going to be the way that lawyers now reach out to other lawyers? And there's nothing like hand-to-hand marketing. We don't advertise. There's nothing wrong with advertising, everything like that. You've got to be set up to receive it. Obviously, if you go spend the kind of money that Morgan & Morgan does, you better have the infrastructure to handle those case calls. The getting back to this type of marketing, I think, is very important, and how you and your firm balance that with what you're going to do via technology is something that every managing partner, every lawyer needs to start having talks with their partners and their associates. What is our plan going forward as we continue to progress as a country, getting out of the pandemic? I was looking at something today, and just about meetings in the fall and everyone's trying to get back to in person. What's that travel schedule going to be like? This is a event that I speak at every year. It used to be called the American Society of Industrial Security. Now it's the Global Security Exchange, the biggest security conference in the world. And it's actually fascinating because they have a event floor that has the latest in surveillance, and it's like a spy convention. I love it. And doing that online stinks because I don't get to see what the latest gadgets are and pretend I'm James Bond for 2-3 days. So, can't wait to get back to these types of events and balance it with technology. So the elephant in the room, right? It has been a struggle and we are behind. And I was a big proponent of the courts, like everything else, going to Zoom jury trials. Compelled, not you have to agree, Zoom civil jury trials. I think they could have done it. We have no constitutional right to face our accuser like they do in the criminal courts. But the courts did not do it. They did in some states, did some really interesting things out in the Pacific Northwest, where if you were under 5% positivity rate in your community, you went into court. If you were over 5%, you were on Zoom, compelled. No discussion, no agreement. And those dockets have cleaned up, and we should have done that, in my humble opinion. We didn't. So right now, what's happening is the courts are picking up. We're seeing jury trials. The courts are balancing between what they can do, how many courtrooms. I think the whole country saw what they did in the Derek Chauvin trial, which really isn't that difficult. I mean, the plexiglass, they barely wore masks because they basically were in their own silos, and we can do that. We're specially set both in June and August this summer. At least I am. We have a bunch of other trials throughout the firm that will be going, and we've got to have trials because we got to move these cases. And so the question is not only the logistics of how the trial is going to look, but also how are these jurors going to look? I mean, think about what our country has gone through since we had the pandemic. I mean, with the racial injustices that have gone on, with the election, with the polarization of this country and where it is. I show this regular jurors and conservative jurors because I handle a lot of negligent security cases. So you would think as a typical plaintiff's trial lawyer, that we might want certain demographics, certain ideological thinkings. So I always use this slide to challenge folks to say, well, when I handle negligent security cases, I may want folks that are, they want the violence stopped. They want to increase security. They want to increase protection, personal responsibility, gun rights. Hey, man, when you try a case in North Florida, you may very well want a staunch NRA member if you're a negligent security lawyer representing a crime victim who feels that if all that would have happened to you, there was a gun on the property with a security guard, with the manager, with the teacher. This never happens because the bad guy is blown away. Now, those are my jurors sometimes in North Florida. After COVID, everybody's got to rethink jury selection. So this is kind of that slide that I talk about. They want to stop the violence, arm everyone, kill the bad guys. Those are my jurors in North Florida. And it's very interesting when we try those cases, folks think, well, you're from Miami, you don't understand jurors up there. We do very, very well up there because of that thinking. We've got to readjust our thinking. We're in a new world for a lot of different reasons. One thing that we have done for the past year is obviously focus group and mock try cases online. And another blessing that we have learned. First of all, you're not renting a hotel. You're not buying a bunch of food. The cost had gone down tremendously. People on Zoom, when you have 12 people on Zoom and they're talking to each other, the folks that are usually the more passive jurors, when you've either mock tried a case or you tried a case, and you can tell who the followers and the leaders are. The followers tend on Zoom to be a little more boisterous because they don't have somebody staring them in the face. They don't have someone maybe intimidating them during a 2-day deliberation. So it's very interesting getting these viewpoints out. And it's much cheaper. So please be doing that. That's something we're going to continue to do post-pandemic is online focus groups. Why not? Will we do in-person ones? You're darn right we will. But do a little bit of both because we need to learn about these new jurors. So, this is just one of the screenshots from the different jury trials that have gone on down here in Dade County. Obviously, my attitude with all this, and I've told the judges I've been in front of is we're going to have to adapt. The perfect world of, everything just goes smoothly, which really there never was a perfect world, obviously, if you try cases. But you are just going to have to adapt. I've got an issue right now where an expert, his wife is very sick. So he can't come live most likely. So, I was doing what we used to do and I was moving for an emergency deposition because the defense wouldn't agree to have a video depo, Zoom depo of him that I could play a trial. And I'm just thinking to myself, what am I doing? We've been doing Zoom hearings for a year. Just call them live a trial through Zoom. I mean, why am I even hesitating to that? So we've got to change our thinking. We've got to be much more adaptive. My laptop didn't start this morning for some reason. Well, get to another computer. I don't have to go anywhere. I can be right at home. That's where I'm doing the webinar from. It's a very adaptive world now that we have to do. This is just be aware of what's going on in your jurisdiction, okay, with regard to jury selection. How many jurors are coming in? What types of jurors are coming in? Okay. There's going to be this problem with in-person juries for a little while. It might not be a problem depending on what side you're on. Be very smart about it. Talk to folks that know what's going on, what type of jurors are appearing and everything along those lines. So know what's going on in your jurisdiction. This is obviously some of the difficulties that have been explained, in Broward. Check-in process was a bit lengthy. Jurors expressed difficulty with operating the video equipment. Some jurors could only view 4 video panels on Zoom, felt uncomfortable because they couldn't see the other people. The Wi-Fi issues. Obviously, this is an issue with a Zoom trial or Zoom jury selection. Those types of things. When I was trying to get the plaintiff's bar to agree to all Zoom trials, I'll never forget, a couple of lawyers said to me, well, I would never agree to that, Mike. Voir dire is everything to me, and I can't pick a jury over Zoom. So I said to him, I said, great. I said, do me a favor, refer me all your catastrophic cases that are in federal court, because you obviously are not going to try a case without a lengthy, perfect voir dire, and you get 10 minutes if you're lucky in federal court. So I'll take all those cases from you. And that's great, because we've got to get back to trying cases. So however we can, we've got to do it, especially if you're a plaintiff lawyer, but on both sides. We've got to move our system along. And, if you think about it, how flexible all of you have become in learning how to do hearings on Zoom, depositions on Zoom, which if you really look at yourself honestly, would you have agreed to that a year and a half ago? Probably not. I wouldn't have. But we adapt. That's one thing I'm proud of the legal profession for doing. This is, again, just findings of the 17th Judicial Circuit mock voir dire. The jurors felt they were comfortable, felt it had some limitations, not a good format for a serious criminal trial. There's different rights there. Some jurors felt slightly limited using a phone for jury service. And that's something that I think we all can address if we were doing Zoom is, you can get iPads for different prices now. They can be reused. They can be sanitized if we were going to do Zoom proceedings, obviously. This is interesting. Given the choice to serve on jury duty via Zoom or live, most felt they would choose Zoom. However, all felt if compelled, they would go to the courthouse and serve on a jury. Abota, probably now a year ago, Dade County, Abota, we did a poll, much like a political poll, to see what the return of service would be of jury summons. And mind you, this was a year ago, the height of the pandemic. We got very good results. I know Broward, a judge recently expressed to me that they were still getting limited folks coming in. I also have a prediction that if judges special set cases, a lot of these cases are going to settle. I have just seen on both sides, it's sad to say, a hesitation by lawyers who've been out of it, been on the sidelines for a year and 2 months to go to trial. And I think those cases are going to resolve. The insurance industry, their risk understanding is different right now. Everybody's a little different. A judge in Broward posed a great question to us when I was doing everything I can to go Zoom trial several months ago, said to the other lawyer, would you feel more comfortable on Zoom where you can see people or with a mask? So that's something to be thinking about either way. And also to be thinking about when you watch that Derek Chauvin trial, having that plexiglass, I would be fine with that in any courtroom. I see Kim popping up on the screen. So that means I'm at 45 minutes, I assume.
Yes.
Kim, do you want me to go through these last slides or open it up for questions? Totally up to you.
I don't see any questions in here yet. So why don't you just go ahead and cover your next slides? And guys, if you have some questions, go ahead and start typing those in the Q&A.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
And again, these are, COVID, and I'd be glad to share this PowerPoint. Just real quick, if anybody wants to write down, my email is mah at Haggard lawfirm.com, all one word. So, and obviously we'll give all this to Case Metrics. They'll get it to you guys. These are just a lot of the opinions through these polls. And so, I think it's important to understand, for instance, I mean, if you look at the second bullet point here, the opinions about shutdowns and government restrictions may also give you insight into how a juror processes information. One of the great disappointments for me during this last year is how this issue became divisive. It just is something, being an American, being very civic minded, caring about my community, I could not believe that happened. However, as a trial lawyer, I better understand it. And you better understand how folks are processing these things and what jurors are showing up and how it impacts your case. Obviously, I mean, you have a dichotomy, not just politically, but economically. So who's showing up during your trials, which is an incredibly important thing. These are all, and this affects Zoom trials if we had them and in person. Who's going to show up? The second bullet point, due to fear and economic hardship, only those who have the financial means and low health risk will be the most willing to serve. So who does that affect? Healthcare worker, defendants, or experts may have increased credibility. I can tell you, I wouldn't want to bring a nursing medical malpractice case right now. After everything that the healthcare workers have been through, and especially nurses. I mean, they're the absolute heroes of our community. So, if you're a plaintiff's lawyer with one of those cases right now, I might want to wait a bit. And I know we've got some things in the chat. I haven't seen it yet, but again, I'm a super fan of the plexiglass, especially with increasing vaccination. I think you're almost to a regular place in trials. So that's something I've said to judges, if you're not outfitted, it doesn't cost much. So let the parties know. And because I think you can get a much more real trial in that respect. But I would love to hear from all of you because I think this is fascinating from every aspect, from trial to, what you're going to do with your office. So not sure if we have questions on that, but thank you so much for having me this morning. And any questions or discussion, I'm ready to go.
Okay, let me just take a look. I didn't see anything in the Q&A. Let's see. I have some people had requested a link to the Haggard Law Firm's website, so you'll find that near the top of the chat. I also listed a link to the Case Metrics YouTube channel where you can find prior webinars and panel discussions. If you subscribe to that, you'll receive notifications on new ones. We have, thanks, Bruce Berger. He said, no questions, very helpful. Thank you, Bruce. We listed Michael Haggard's personal email address, mah@haggardlawfirm.com. I listed mine for those that need to reach out to me, kim.white@case-metrics.com. Hello, Todd Michaels. I think I anticipated your question before you asked it. I think I've got that one in there already. Let me see. I think we have some questions now. People were asking about CLEs. I will let Stacy address that.
Yes, ma'am. We have applied for the CLE. The state of Florida has been, understandably so, with COVID. They've been a little bit slow in processing course applications. So as soon as we receive that course number, we will forward that to you, Kim, and then you can distribute that to all the participants.
Okay, and if you guys want to send us also Michael's PowerPoint, we'll send all of that at the same time. I think some people wanted to see the slides. And once we have all of that compiled, we'll send a single email to all attendees, so they'll have that. Thank you to the anonymous attendee who mentioned that closed captioning was not enabled on the webinar. My apologies for that. We will make sure going forward that we enable that when we're setting up the webinar. Not something that you can do during, but as we are setting up all of the parameters for future ones, that is something that we need to be mindful to do. Again, my apologies, and I thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I see some questions here. Kim, would you want me just to read them and answer them, or?
Yeah, let's see here. One attendee has asked, what are some online mock trial companies you've used that you've been satisfied with, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. Joyce Dwyer, who I can get you all her contact information, is someone we've used for many years, does a fantastic job. And now with Zoom, again, you don't even have to have a graphics company, a video company. I mean, there's so many ways you save money. Also, I will tell you, there's some great books about doing it on your own. If you are going to do it on your own, again, Zoom gives us that capability. Make sure the key is recruiting. The key is getting jurors that aren't professional jurors, that aren't repeat jurors. So that's why we continue to use, especially in big cases, obviously, Joyce Dwyer. She's fantastic.
And can you spell that last name, please, for us?
Absolutely. Dwyer. And I'm sure Stacy or Todd could put her information in the chat for everybody, since my partner Todd's always monitoring when I screw things up. And I appreciate that. He does a great job of pointing that out to me. But yeah, and it's great. It's great competition. I mean, Todd, I'm undefeated against Todd in mock trials. He doesn't like me to say that, but it is you can't learn enough about your case in doing that. And it's a great practice run if you're about to try a case. And now that it's so reasonably cheap, I just can't emphasize that enough to everybody.
Yeah, and it's their job to be candid and perfectly honest with you. And how valuable is that before you go and do it for real, right?
Absolutely.
We have a question from Kim Grant. It says, not on topic, but what is your criteria for taking a negligent security case?
That's a great question, and the terrible answer is it all depends. Negligent security cases are very difficult. When I start out picking a jury in a negligent security case, the first thing I say is, hey, John Johnson shot and killed our client. John Johnson's not here. We're not suing John Johnson. We're suing Walmart. Does anybody have a problem with that? That the person who actually pulled the trigger isn't here, isn't a defendant? And the reason I do that is because that's the number one hurdle. That's always the number one hurdle. And so the first criteria, really, I hate to say it, is you've got to have very serious damages, because the cases are going to cost a lot of money in terms of cost, your investigation, experts, everything like that. And then typically you're going to really look at the crime statistics for the premises, wherever it happened, the nature of those premises, the amount of security at a hotel or an apartment complex certainly going to be different than a restaurant or a gas station. And then finally, what happened during your incident? Is it a deal where the assailant and the victim know each other? Is it a quick incident? So there's a lot of varying factors on those cases, and be glad to talk to you about them anytime. But you've got to do your real research and investigation ahead of time, because once you get in, they're going to cost a lot of money and everything along those lines. So Kim, you've got our information. Please reach out. We'd be glad to talk to you about it.
Okay, I have a follow-up question on that, just out of curiosity. When you're asking that question during voir dire, anybody have a problem with John Doe not being here, the actual shooter, understanding there's some variability, do most jurors or prospective jurors have a problem with that, or most of them okay with it?
Yeah, I'll tell you, one time I did that, and I had an out of body experience after that because everyone in the veneer raised their hand that they had a serious problem with that. And so I just started thinking of other careers I should have chosen as I was up there in front of the veneer. And then that's where picking a jury, you've got to really be ready, and you've got to try to get as many jurors out as you can based on that issue. So you're right, it varies. A case I tried about 3 months before the pandemic was up in Fort Pierce, and got a very interesting response there. I mean, a very kind of like, well, why would they be here? That person should be in jail. That's understanding the differences between civil responsibility and criminal responsibility. And it was very, very interesting response from that Fort Pierce veneer versus, some others we've gotten. So, but you've got to ask it, sometimes trial lawyers make the mistake of, wow, I don't want to hear that answer. Well, my thing is you're going to hear the answer. You're just going to hear it when they knock and they have a verdict, and you're not going to like that answer. So, so you gotta ask those tough questions and be ready to, get to work. So
Absolutely. I remember two examples of this back in my defense days. One was I was defending an automobile dealership. And one of our questions was too broad in retrospect. Has anyone ever had a negative experience in dealing with a car dealership in the repair shop? 100% of the hands went up. We said, okay, let us qualify that question a little bit. We thought, oh no, we completely poisoned the entire jury. And I'm trying to think, there was another one that was on the tip of my tongue. Oh, we had one where a plaintiff was suing a relative. And in that case, a representative of the plaintiff. And we said, does anyone have an issue that you think would, prejudice you in any way about someone suing a relative? And again, 100% of the hands went up. We did end up settling that case during the trial. But like you said, they're not always going to tell you what you want to hear, but it is what you need to know.
absolutely.
You've got to just jump in, put your face in the chainsaw and see how it turns out.
Absolutely.
We have another good question from Adana Aguinali. Hi, Adana. How do you address possible coaching of the defendant while doing a Zoom deposition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing you always should be asking is, are you alone in that room? Who else is in there? And everything along those lines, trying to get that. You can tell when people are looking, you can tell if someone's trying to hide their fact they're in the room and it turns out they aren't, that's a real problem. Then number two, when they look away from the Zoom, they keep looking, everything along the lines, I would point that out in the record. There's not much more you can do from that. But I think if you can identify who's there, you can, show if they're looking off. Those are the kind of things you can do. I haven't found it to be the problem we all expected in the beginning. I think we all expected that. I haven't really had the problem. I know I guess we have two different things going on. We have the chat and then we have the Q&A. I noticed that Michael Dolce asked a very similar question where now that we're getting vaccinated and you want to take more adverse witnesses in person, what are we going to do? And that's going to be the next battle. What we've done in our cases is if there's somebody I really want to take in person, I'd make an agreement. Usually it'd be, I get to take the principal defendants, they get to take the plaintiffs in person. And so we've done that a little bit. Now we're starting to have issues where, if a deponent, it's like, look, I don't know who everybody's vaccinated. I don't know what the deal is. I think that deponent still has rights. I don't know if there have been new orders on that, but that probably is going to be the next battle. And how do we agree? Are we going to have hearings on that? Hopefully the courts will come out with some type of standards on it. I have not had a problem where I've really been upset with, I took somebody by Zoom until the other night. I took one of those experts, we've all dealt with him, who was obstinate, was not going to answer a question no matter what, and took advantage of the Zoom. And I, at the end of the day, I'm like, look, he can't ever testify like that in front of a judge, in front of a jury. So he's probably going to be that way in person. So that's fine. but that is the next issue, Mike. And it'll be interesting how the courts, I hope we don't clog up the court hearings with those battles, but we might, because people aren't going to agree. They're going to get whatever's strategically better for them and along those lines.
We have another good question from Andrew Freeman. Hi, Andrew. Thank you. First, he says, thanks, Michael. What do you think about your medical experts examining your clients via Zoom? Are you concerned about their credibility, having not had actual hands on the patient?
Yeah, I think that is an issue. I've I haven't had that issue too much. I guess it's changing now. Obviously, in the beginning when everything was telemed, that was a problem. And certainly, now I think about it, did have it in one case. The kid was so profoundly brain injured, they couldn't have really argued it. But I think that you can explain it. Obviously, we all went through it for a while. Now I think we're coming out and doctors are seeing people in person. I've had issues with liability experts in aquatic cases, not do site inspections because they're out of state and in states with really strict quarantine. And but we did a video inspection, and inevitably the experts answer to that was, well, your gate was so broken at the pool. I mean, do I really need to go see the broken gate? There's 1,000 pictures of it. So that's kind of a good response.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think now we've got to ask more of our doctors, hey, please see the client. Right now we have a IME going on and it's live. Our client's vaccinated, the doctor's vaccinated, the lawyer that will attend is vaccinated. So, we're kind of seeing those kind of things. So it's a great question though. And I think as we get out of it, you want to make sure that they're starting to have those in-person doctor visits would be kind of what I think.
I agree. Any other questions from anyone? Let me check. We are seeing questions show up in both Q&A and in the chat. So let me just double check that. I don't see anything else. Did you have any comments for the end that you wanted to use to wrap up this, Michael? Or are you good?
No, I would just, I think we're all, not to use the overturned phrase, we're all in this together, but, as people do have these issues, if you're on these listservs, share them. Because I just hope we don't have to have a pandemic to figure out all these great things about press law the good things we have found. So I encourage everybody to keep being, just progressive and advancing what we're doing and share it with everybody. Because it can make our lives as lawyers a little easier and our staffs and everybody like that. So I just really appreciate everybody spending some time this morning.
I think my best takeaway from this entire thing is the hybrid approach. And that's a word that we've been using a lot at Case Metrics. We have been putting some plans in place as we're transitioning back to the office. And an idea we've come up with that we want to try, and our employees seem to like it, is still working at home remotely on Mondays and Fridays, and then all being together in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, for people who have been vaccinated and they feel safe being around people. No one's forced to do anything they don't want to do. We're a sweet little work family and we want everybody to, to be safe and do what's comfortable for them. But we feel like that's a good hybrid approach. I feel like, most people who are entrepreneurial don't look at things as black and white. When you ask, do you want to do this or that? My answer is usually yes. I want to do both. And so I just think, like everything else during COVID, you try that and see how that approach works. I think what we're going to do is a future webinar where we're going to talk about some of those hybrid approaches and what those look like, both for using office space. Do you still need your office space? Will you have some employees that will end up being full-time remote? Will you have some that take the hybrid approach? I've heard from a lot of female employees, both lawyers and paralegals, that they feel like they're primarily charged with the responsibility of monitoring the virtual education of their children. And so they don't really want to abandon their jobs. They just feel like somebody had to stay home and do that role. And so I think a lot of law firms could benefit from a part-time paralegal who could have flex hours to be able to get all of that done. So we'll be talking about some of those things in the future. I want to hear from some of those employers and from their paralegals who are working remotely to see if we can kind of get together and come up with some ideas that will work for them so they can work at home and to keep employers from losing really valuable employees in the process. So I think that's a conversation that we can continue on another day. For those of you who are not Casemetrics subscribers, we thank you for being here today. If you'd like, we can give you a free 10-minute online look at the database before you settle your next case. If you look in the chat, you'll see a link where you can click to schedule that. We'll also shoot you an email afterwards. Most lawyers are coming to us with a real case they're evaluating today. And they'll tell us about the case. They'll tell us what the last offer, last demand was. We really get into details about the injuries and the treatment and anything about the case that makes it particularly strong or weak. Then we schedule a 10-minute Zoom call with you. We let you look at a list of recent settlements and verdicts to make sure that you have a better perspective on whether that last offer is one that you should take. From a defense perspective, if you are evaluating a case for an insurance company and you're about to put that range in addition to your years of experience, you can also look at more data and perhaps help you have a better overview of the value of the case. So take us up on that. We are happy to help. Let me see if anything else has come in. All right. Just lots of good thank yous to you, Michael. And thank you from us. We appreciate it. Stay tuned for more Casemetrics webinars, and do visit Michael's site. And if you have cases you want to discuss with him, you have his contact information here. Thanks to all of you. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Kim.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Okay.